Zelda bosses are usually a pretty mixed bag. While some bosses are often brought up in conversations about the best in all of gaming, others are notoriously awful. Boss fights is a topic I don't talk about much on my channel. My last video related to this topic being nearly a year ago, when I ranked every 3D boss from worst to best. But recently, I've been thinking, and not positively. There are some really bad boss fights in The Legend of Zelda. In this video, I thought we'd talk about said lowlights in the series by covering the worst boss in every Zelda game. To compile this list, I considered a combination of enjoyment, difficulty, design, and much more, though the picks were almost entirely chosen from my personal experience. As always, this video will only contain mainline Zelda games, so no spin-offs like Hyrule Warriors are mentioned. Oh, and I also decided to leave the 3 multiplayer games off the list cause, well, I don't really want to talk about them. I also decided to only count full-on boss fights when making my picks, meaning no mini-bosses made the cut. With all that out of the way, let's find the worst boss in every Zelda game. The Legend of Zelda for the NES was understandably very limited with its hardware. Surprisingly, there are some really solid boss fights in this game. While some like Gleeok or Ganon can be really difficult for inexperienced players, at least they're pretty cool and kinda fun. Unfortunately, a boss that is neither cool nor fun is Gohma. Gohma may be a very iconic recurring Zelda boss, but her first appearance was a really bad showing. To defeat Gohma, Link must use the bow to shoot her in the eye. Once. Yes, this boss dies in one freaking hit. I would understand how this makes sense if it was actually hard to hit the shot, but it's just not hard at all. I don't think I need to explain why this boss fight is really boring. It's over in mere seconds, which is very underwhelming for a game with a usually pretty tough boss roster. While it was the first ever Zelda game, The Legend of Zelda features a solid roster overall, though Gohma is unfortunately very easily the weakest in the cast. One thing you'll notice over the course of this video is how there are 2 specific types of bosses that I like to pick from. One being the underwhelming and boring bosses like the previously mentioned Gohma, and the other being the bosses that make me want to rip my hair out. Thankfully, Zelda 2 features a lot of bosses that make me want to do just that, which makes my job here a bit easier. Out of this tough cast, I think the Thunderbird is the one that I enjoy the least. This fight is really hard, and rightfully so, since it is the final or second final boss in the entire game. The difficulty is the main thing holding this boss back. I really detest bullet hell type bosses, which unfortunately appear more than I'd like, and the Thunderbird is a prime example of this irritation. I also just want to point out, what the hell is this thing supposed to be? I won't lie, the sprite is still really cool, but I'm seeing neither thunder nor bird. Well, I guess it's got wings, so that's birdie enough. I don't know, it just looks like a whole lot of nothing to me, which definitely makes the fight even less enjoyable than it already was. To me, A Link to the Past has always been one of the more difficult Zelda games, and its boss roster is one of the leading reasons why. Just a minute ago, I had mentioned how I really dislike bullet hell in Zelda games. Well, lucky for me, A Link to the Past has a boss that's just as irritating as the Thunderbird. That being the boss of Skull Woods, Mothula. Not only does Mothula shoot out a ton of projectiles, these projectiles are super hard to dodge. The twist with this battle is how the floor moves like a conveyor, constantly throwing off the player's movements. If that wasn't annoying enough, the walls are lined with spikes that can move and also damage the player. Mothula is supposed to be taken out with the fire rod, which is the dungeon's item, though for some strange reason there isn't a single magic jar in this entire room, meaning that if you mess up your shots, you gotta use your annoying sword. Probably the most difficult boss in the game and easily the most irritating. Let's take a break from bosses that make me angry and cover a boss that is just flat out lame. The anglerfish from Link's Awakening is an iconic boss, but for all the wrong reasons. This fight is notoriously one of the easiest in the entire series. The way to defeat this crazed fish is by swinging your sword at its light thingy weak point 3 times. Yes, you have to hit this boss with your sword 3 times until it's over. Thankfully, this is only the case for the Game Boy version of the game. While the Switch remake spices things up a bit with some added obstacles and more health, it's still ridiculously easy, which makes the anglerfish a no-brainer for the worst boss fight in Link's Awakening. Now we're entering a game that I don't necessarily think has a bad boss fight. Sure, some are easily weaker than others, but none of them stand out as irritating or boring. King Dodongo was my pick for the worst boss in Ocarina of Time when I made the boss ranking a while back. As of right now, my opinion really hasn't changed. King Dodongo is another boss that suffers from being far too easy. The idea behind this battle is you have to chuck a bomb into his mouth at the right time. This is about the only interesting thing this fight has to offer, and it's painfully easy to pull off. His attacks are also not even remotely threatening, and his design is very bland compared to the rest. Again, I don't necessarily think this boss is bad, just the weakest in a solid roster. Oh, and who can forget the banging music that plays during this fight? Georg sucks. Like, real bad. If you've watched my 3D boss ranking, you'd know that I put Georg near the very bottom of the list, and my opinion remains the same. I genuinely do not think there is a single thing that I actually like about this boss. First of all, the design is really ugly. Not even kinda cool looking like a Dolwa or Goat from the same game, Georg is just hideous. Apart from the visuals, the fight is also just not fun at all. The Zora swimming controls are less than ideal, which is a huge part of the battle. The part where you're forced to sit on the center platform and wait for Georg to make his move is just a full-on snooze fest. This boss was changed quite a bit from the N64 version to the 3DS. Unfortunately, both fights suck an equal amount. Very easily the worst boss in Majora's Mask, and one of my least favorite in the entire series as well. I had a tough time picking the worst boss in Oracle of Seasons. None of them really stood out to me as bad, though most of them aren't that great either. They're just kind of boring and forgettable. The most boring of this underwhelming roster would probably be Aquamentus. The only thing that I think is even remotely cool about this boss fight is how it's a callback to Zelda 1, with the boss sharing the same design and name as the first ever Zelda boss. This fight is really straightforward, requiring the player to strike the dragon's weak point a few times. I understand why this boss is so easy, being the first in the game and all, but it's just so boring that I can't think too highly of it. Again, I don't necessarily think Aquamentus is bad, just the weakest of this weak roster. However, a boss that I do remember disliking is Head Thwomp from Oracle of Ages. This is one of those bosses that I have a personal grudge against, which greatly improves their chances at being featured on this list. Head Thwomp is the final boss of the second dungeon, Wing Dungeon, and the concept is pretty simple. Toss a bomb into the head to make the boss spin. Landing on the correct color will damage the enemy. However, landing on another color will cause a number of things to happen, all dependent on the color. Well, yes, there is a bit of skill involved with timing your throws. You're honestly better off to just close your eyes and hope for the best. This fight in general is so tedious, and I've spent longer than I'd like to admit trying to land on the right color. Somehow, this boss is both really easy and really hard at the same time, which is not a good thing in the slightest. While my personal experience is definitely taking priority, my hatred for this boss is still very warranted. Puppet Ganon is probably the best boss fight that I've talked about so far, but he's still pretty easily my least favorite in Wind Waker. Puppet Ganon is essentially 3 bosses in one. Unfortunately, all 3 bosses are lame as hell. My favorite of the 3 phases is pretty easily the first, against his puppet form, where Link must use the boomerang to cut the string suspending the puppet. I really like Wind Waker's boomerang, which is probably why I think higher of this first phase. The second requires the player to use the reflection of the water to avoid being crushed by the huge spider. This phase is actually a pretty cool concept. Though it's not too fun to actually play, it's still decently interesting. The worst of the 3 phases by far is the final one, where he transforms into a worm. Hitting his tail weak point thing with the light arrows can be such a pain. Since this dude literally doesn't stop moving at all, you're honestly better off just getting lucky and having him run into your arrow path. Another thing about this boss that greatly tanks its enjoyability is how it's fought right before the final boss of the game, Ganondorf, which is better in every possible way, making Puppet Ganon seem even more underwhelming. A very tedious boss with even worse timing in the story. I honestly don't have much to say about my least favorite boss from Minish Cap, being Big Octorok, from the Temple of Droplets. Looking back at it, Minish Cap's boss roster was surprisingly good. There aren't really any bosses from this game that I don't like, though Big Octorok definitely stood out as the easy pick. The main issue with this fight is how it's primarily fought on an icy surface, and if you've played any Zelda game ever, you know how annoying walking on ice can get. The main idea behind this boss is trying to judge if he's gonna spit out a rock, which you can send back at him, or suck you in, which will will damage you. Finding out if he's gonna spit or suck is honestly a lot harder than it looks, and can really screw you over if you mess up too many times. Again, I don't think this boss is terrible at all. I actually think it's really neat how you can see him from basically the start of the dungeon, though I do think he's pretty easily my least favorite boss in the game. I really tried to avoid picking this boss as my least favorite in Twilight Princess, but it's so unenjoyable that I couldn't help myself. Ganondorf, more specifically Ganondorf's horseback battle, is one of many bosses found in Twilight Princess's finale. Unfortunately, it's easily the worst. As I just mentioned, this boss fight is a horseback battle against Ganondorf. Conceptually, this boss sounds super cool. Link and Zelda chasing after Ganondorf on horse sounds like a great idea, though the execution left a lot to be desired. To actually defeat Ganondorf, you must position Epona in a good enough spot for Zelda to get a clear shot in with her bow. This is way easier said than done, since Zelda's aim really isn't the best. And yeah, I know the player is actually the one aiming the arrows, but I'll keep blaming her as cope. Like the Puppet Ganon fight, this boss is greatly hindered by its place in the main story. All of the bosses before and after this one are easily better, and I don't even think it's close. While it is a cool idea, Ganondorf's horseback battle is really not that fun of a boss fight. Phantom Hourglass was one of the most recent Zelda games I played. While I thought the game was alright, it had some moments that I really disliked. And no, I'm not talking about the Temple of the Ocean King, I'm talking about the awful Ghost Ship boss fight. This is yet another boss fight that takes place at the very end of the game, right before the grand finale. I'm not sure what Nintendo's deal with making shitty bosses before the cool final boss is, but they gotta stop doing it. Anyway, this boss fight takes place entirely on the sea, meaning you have to control the SS Linebeck to take the ship down. Controlling this stupid boat was already one of my least favorite parts of the game, but it gets even worse when a boss fight is involved. To actually take down the ghost ship, you have to use your cannon to take down the cannons on the enemy ship. I really hate using cannons in this game. It involves so much precise clicking, which is really hard to do on a small screen like the DS has. This boss fight also goes on for way too long, which obviously makes the fight 1,000 times more tedious. I died many times fighting this boss a few months ago, and yeah, that's probably a user error, but my point still stands. This fight sucks. A lot. Okay, I'm gonna cheat a bit here. There is a boss, or should I say part of a boss, from Spirit Tracks that is so unbelievably bad that I just have to talk about it. And surprise surprise, it's another boss that's fought right before the finale. I'm not quite sure what to even call this boss, since technically it's a Malladus fight, but you're also fighting Chancellor Cole. Whatever you call it, this part of the fight is f***ing awful. The main objective of this battle is to slowly move Zelda forward while avoiding the various distractions to reach Malladus in Zelda's body. While this might sound easy enough, this specific part of the game features some of the worst controls I have ever had the displeasure of experiencing. You see, the DS Zelda games have one fatal flaw. You do everything on the bottom screen. Like, literally everything. This makes sections with a lot of necessary quick reactions a huge pain in the ass, and that's exactly what this boss is. It's super easy to accidentally drag Zelda's movement path when trying to clear the enemies, and vice versa. Like the ghost ship fight, this is unbelievably hard to do smoothly with the DS's tiny screen, making the whole fight very unenjoyable in general. And on top of all that, this battle goes on for way too long, which obviously sucks. While technically this could be counted as the Malladus fight in general, I had to mention it in this video, since it's just such a bad boss fight, and one that I don't hear anyone complain about nearly enough. Out of every single boss I've mentioned and will mention on this list, there is not one that I hate more than him. Many longtime viewers probably already know who I'm talking about. It's the boss that combines two of my least favorite things in all of gaming: a timer and repetition. We knew he had to be here somewhere. Skyward Sword's worst boss, the f***ing Imprisoned. As I just mentioned, this boss combines both repetition and a time limit, which are two of my least favorite things in gaming. This boss already sucks sucks as is. Chasing this dumb looking avocado demon up the sealed grounds while chopping away at his egg toe things gets old very quick. But the fact that you have to fight this dude 3 times makes it 1,000 times worse. Thankfully, the third and final fight are actually pretty fun, which uses Groos's invention, the Groosinator, to launch Link onto the floating enemy. For this video, I'm including all 3 battles with the Imprisoned as this game's worst. The only positive thing that I can think to say is how the lore is kinda interesting, but that's about it. I don't like the gameplay, design, stress, or repetition that comes with this boss, making the Imprisoned an easy choice for this list. Ending our streak of really bad bosses is A Link Between Worlds, arguably my favorite game of all time. This boss roster is extremely good and honestly is just slept on in general. I think every boss in this game is at least good, but I think the worst is pretty easily Darkstare, who is found at the end of the Ice Ruins. Ice is the primary factor for why this boss can get annoying. Since Ice is notoriously very irritating to deal with in Zelda games, this should come as no surprise to anyone. This fight also requires the player to move around a lot, to either catch the boss while it's hopping around or to dodge their attacks. Again, the ice makes this really annoying to actually do. Honestly, I don't have much else to say about this boss fight. Still a solid boss, but the worst in a great roster. Breath of the Wild shakes this list up a bit. While I could pick one of the 4 Blight Ganon battles, I think those bosses are at least alright. I consider choosing Dark Beast Ganon, since it's a very underwhelming conclusion to this epic game, but I instead decided on one of the many overworld bosses this game has to offer. Eventually, I landed on Molduga for this game's worst. First of all, this boss's music is freaking insane, easily the best aspect for this boss. To me, Molduga has always been the least enjoyable overworld boss to fight. I really like flurry rushing against enemies like Lionel's. Unfortunately, dodging a Molduga's attacks just involves running around awkwardly in the sand. I don't think I went out of my way to fight a Molduga more than a couple of times during my Breath of the Wild playthroughs. Nothing about this battle is fun to me, and the rewards aren't very good either. While I don't think this boss is awful, it's still not great, making it my least favorite overworld boss and boss in general from this game. Sludge-like and Mukta Rock are basically neck and neck for the worst boss in Tears of the Kingdom. Both of these bosses are shit. Quite literally, but I think I hate Sludge-like just a bit more. Both of these bosses have the unfortunate gift of revolving around Sidon's stupid water ability. I love Sidon just as much as the next guy, but man did they fumble with his ability. The main idea behind this boss fight is using either Sidon's ability or any sort of water dispensing item to clear the sludge from the like so you can attack it. That's basically the entire fight. Nothing about it is interesting or even remotely fun. The design is also horrendous, which doesn't help its case. Honestly, Nintendo dropped the ball with the entire Zora arc in Tears of the Kingdom, featuring a lame ability, dungeon, and my least favorite boss in the game. We finally arrived at the latest game in the series, being Echoes of Wisdom. Just like my 3D boss ranking, my pick for the worst boss in Echoes of Wisdom is still the same as my boss ranking from said game, which I'm sure a lot of you haven't seen since it's my least viewed video ever. Thanks guys. And in that video, I chose Tecum as the worst, which is an opinion that remains the same over a year later. For those who don't remember, Tecum is the boss fought right before entering Null's body. This boss fight is basically one of those enemy horde battles, just like the ones from Skyward Sword or Tears of the Kingdom. Tecum will constantly spawn enemies to distract the player from the main boss. I think this fight is just okay, but it's very forgettable, which greatly holds it back. Though the music is absolutely bangin', which is an area that Nintendo hardly misses on. Still, it's not enough to carry it from being any higher than my least favorite boss in Echoes of Wisdom. Thank you all so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more Zelda content just like this. I'd like to remind you all that I have a community Discord server, so if you'd like to get closer to both myself and the community, be sure to join using the link in the description of this video or my channel. Thank you all for the continued support on my channel. It means so much to see you all enjoying the content this much, and I appreciate all of you who continue to do so. Thanks again for watching the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.